a couple of things as we kind of get started here. I wanted to share with you, I'm assuming everybody in here is a designer. Throw your hands up. Good. It's everybody good. Okay, put them down. We're not used to total acceptance. And I'm not used to total acceptance. It's a very subjective field that we're in. So this is going to work out really well because I've got a center aisle here. And what I'd like to do is if I say something that's of interest or value to you or that you agree with, if this side over here, mostly because it's a smaller side, if you could be just entirely quiet. No, it's okay. And this side over here, you can applaud uproariously, you can, whatever you want to. But, you know, that way I'm feeling more like a designer because I'm not receiving total agreement. And that's our profession. That's the way we kind of roll. You can switch off. The next time, you guys be quiet, and then you can uproariously applaud and just kind of switch it back and forth. So let me talk about trends. And this is something that we've been doing for 12 years now through LogoLounge. And trends have to be set up. You have to understand why we're going to be talking about trends the way that we are. First of all, everybody lives by trends. It's part of our lives. The way we dress, what we eat, where we drink, what we read, what we watch, all trends, if you will. And the great thing that the designers especially do is we evolve them. Otherwise, we'd all be dressed the same. Everybody in here would be wearing a plaid shirt right now as opposed to just half of you. But we evolve things. And that's the important part about identity design especially, is that you take something that you're finding and you don't imitate it. You find a way to evolve it and move it forward. And I thought that what I might do is to open this up is talk a little bit about a story that I heard a number of years ago. For starters, how many of you are familiar with Fresh Air on NPR, Terry Gross? Okay, good, good. So you know who I'm referring to. And she does this great interview program. And Terry Gross was doing a particular program, and this one was on, let's see. Here we go. Pop forward into it. And this is where we get to find out if it really works. Terry Gross was doing a entire week on the British invasion. And when I say the British invasion, I'm not referring to something else. I'm referring to the music British invasion. And as part of this presentation, she had Ken Baker, who is a music critic for NPR, on. And Ken Baker was asked what his favorite music was from this particular era. There we go. So this little symbol that you're going to see here isn't actually a poorly crafted Target logo. That's actually that's the RAF symbol for the Royal Air Force, which was a symbol that was adopted during the 60s and 70s by British bands, especially as rock and roll tradition really started up. And as part of this presentation that they were doing on Fresh Air, one of the things that they asked Ken Baker was what his favorite music was from that era. And he said, well, you know, honestly, you're probably not going to know most of the songs that I bring up, because most of the songs that I bring up were ones that were experimental, that the bands weren't necessarily known for. And when I talk about the British invasion, just so you know, we're talking about bands like the Beatles, the Who, the Turtles, the Byrds, the Zombies, so on and so forth. Bands that probably most of you have never heard of, with maybe the exception of the Beatles. Sorry. And Ken Baker, as he was talking about this, started talking about the fact that this experimental music always was on side B of the 45, if you will. That was a record, and they were, you know, well, they're coming back now, so you know what they are, yeah. And they always put the good stuff on the A side, and they put the crappy stuff on the B side, you know, unless you're Ken Baker, in which you really love that B side. So here's what happened when all of these bands started coming to the US. Their music reached a point of saturation. If you can imagine, this sound that everybody clamored for suddenly got to that point where, you know, it was just everywhere. But it reached saturation, and people started looking for something new. And bands didn't want to lose their relevance, especially in the United States, where they had enormous profits to be made. So they started doing some satellite kind of research. They started doing this experimental music that was different than that sound that they originally came over with. And I like to think of it this way. I like to think of the bands going out and having this group of little sounds that they're practicing with that they haven't really found an audience for, that are being formed around this saturated trend, if you will. And what ends up happening, and the reason I'm sharing this story is it's exactly what happens in design, is that eventually one of these little sounds ends up catching on. And when that happens, what happens? People start to leave the music that they were doing, and that one little trend that they had starts to grow. And it's an evolution. It grows, and that's the newest thing. So the bands abandoned all of that work that they had been doing on the experimental sounds, Ken Baker's favorite music, and started with this new sound. But this process is amazing because the relevant part of the story to me is that as hard as you might try, there's no way that anyone in this room can start a trend. So think about that for just a second. You can design the seminal piece that is what that trend evolves out of. But in order for it to be a trend, somebody has to find some value there. Somebody has to find something that they want to emulate or imitate or evolve into something else. So it's actually those people, those followers of whatever that idea is that you create, that create that trend. So that being said, it's an evolutionary process, and it's going to be exactly the same in design. Something is a design trend, and it evolves into the next one, and then into the next one. And if you trace that DNA backwards, you can see that they all tie together. But keep in mind, it's impossible to start a trend. That being said, so this information that we're presenting today in the report is based off of what we've pulled together at LogoLounge. A number of those in the audience that have heard of LogoLounge or that, okay, good. Oh, you make me feel good. 12 years ago, it would be 2 people in the front row. And they would have been my mom, and no. But LogoLounge has been around for 12 years now, and has been very fortunate to have a number of best-selling books with the LogoLounge books, and now with our latest Logo Creed book, where we really talk about how identity comes about and how to go through the process. But if you notice, this was a snapshot of a recent LogoLounge page, so there's about 212,000 some logos as of now that have been loaded by thousands of members from over 100 countries around the world to the site. And it's this really kind of real-time process of designers uploading things as they're designing them so that you can really see what's being done. And they also upload their rejects so you can see what didn't get picked, sometimes some of the very best work. So I want you to imagine just for a second going to a grocery store. Walking down the aisle, let's say it's a cereal aisle. And over here, you've got the sugary cereals and all the little, the eyeballs staring down at the kids. And over here, you've got the organic stuff and the really healthy stuff over here. And, when you go into the store, you expect this level of context. You expect organization. And imagine that very same group of groceries suddenly just strewn across the field. No organization, no order. Your syrup's over here by the Clorox, which is shit. Where's the... Oh, here's the cat sand. It's a process that wouldn't be very inviting to find information. But LogoLounge actually takes all of this information and it's sorted by keywords and date and designer and type of industry, so on and so forth, so that you can really zero in on exactly the information you're looking for. And every year, we take all the logos that have been submitted over the last year, and this last year, for this report, we went through approximately 24,000 some logos, 24,500 total logos. And guys, we looked at every single one of those logos. So here's a little bit of a behind-the-scenes glimpse, and I've never actually shown anybody how the process goes on, so it's either as archaic or as incredibly intelligent as this may come across, which is that we end up taking all 24,000 some logos from this year, and we sort through them one by one. We go, anything that we haven't seen a million times before, or anything that appears to have any freshness, we pull off into a separate file. Then we open up all of those logos that we've just pulled off. And this year it was about 1,600 logos that we pulled off. So what you're looking at there is actually a sort page that has some 1,600 logos on it. If you look up close, we put them in these squares of 100 each. And then we play the world's largest game of match game. We gotta go, okay, that one kind of looks like this one. Oh, and this one's kind of, you know, and the amazing thing about this process is finding these clusters amongst logos. Now, some of them can be anticipated, some of them just totally out of the blue. What you're looking at here is when we start to pull these clusters out, I think this year we found somewhere in the zone of about 150 different clusters. And then we kind of sort out all the ones that we've seen before and start trying to hunt through those to find the ones that have the greatest amount of relevance. Out of those 150 some, we knocked it down to these 46. If you have a camera, now's the time to take it because that's the only time you'll see all 46 of those. Okay, sorry, I moved too quick. It's okay, it's gonna come up later, I promise you. So let's get into the report. If anything, you may get a little bit tired during this presentation of hearing about monoline. But I want to just bring it up very quickly because monoline is probably one of those directions that started evolving here a couple of years ago and is one of the most prevalent kind of trends that we're working with right now, which is this idea of an unscalable, single stroke kind of line that's used for the crafting of something. And a lot of it comes from its application as user interface. A lot of it comes from apps, a lot of it comes from icons and the likes, but you're going to see a lot of it. This is kind of funny because motion lines harkens back to, you know, imagine Robert Miles Runyon's 1984 Los Angeles Olympics Stars in Motion kind of thing, you know, where you've got these stripes coming through it, you know, indicating it's fast, it's moving, it's, you know, we're going. And these logos all pick up these same kind of stripes and the same kind of lines to it. You know, it's ringing or it's appearing or it's moving quickly. And the thing that I wanted to share with you is we go through these is how this applies to a company and why there is value here. So think about this, that this demonstrates action, it demonstrates motion, and show of hands quickly, those of you out there that have had to design a logo in your lifetime, okay, so it's everybody, put them back down except for her. You know, everybody else has, you know, so we can kind of keep looking back at her. Matter of fact, you and I, we'll just talk together, okay, since you didn't actually raise your hand. But when we put together a brief on what the company is looking for, we have all these things, such as, it's forward moving. Well, okay, what company isn't? We're always in motion. We have many people that work together to make this process work. And, you know, you've got all this stuff, but you refine it down to those elements that are really the key, critical, unique elements about that company. Motion lines, number one. Number two, I share this. This is the 2012 mark that Pentagram did for Mohawk, which I think is beautiful, by the way. It was crafted by Michael Beirut and Joe Marinick. And the reason that I show this is sometimes it takes a few years for you to see a trend actually kind of launch and take off. And it's not that this hasn't been done before, but I think that they did it so eloquently that it really influenced the design tradition. And the second one is links, which is this idea of these soft, very approachable kind of shapes that are usually either straight links or curvilinear that connect together in such a way that you can see this kind of jointed movement that can occur in the middle. It kind of gives you the sense that others, if it's a company, can come and join into this process. It shows the flexibility of a company. It talks about being able to work with others well in the way that this kind of comes together. I also wanted to kind of throw this up there. This is by Sagmeister Walsh, and it's an identity for function engineering that they just did. And I think it's really beautiful. It uses this, and I will tell you that their firm is one of my very favorite because you don't think of them as an identity firm necessarily, but as incredibly conceptual designers. And I think that some of the work they do is probably, as far as identity goes, some of the most conceptually advanced work that's out there. This just really does a nice job of kind of showing off the way that links ends up working together in such a way that it shows this functionality. Okay, states. I don't know why, but we were going through it, and all of a sudden there were all these pictures of states. I'm lying. Okay, this is really what it was. I called it states, okay? I was looking at it like, God, isn't that like Montana? Or, you know, and there were a huge number of logos that looked just like Colorado. I don't know. Inside joke for those that know geography. So as you look at these, look at how austere they are. What does it kind of say about this company? It kind of alludes to the industry or the interest that they have by the shape itself on the outside. But it's kind of the simplicity of an unadorned promise that they're making to their potential audience. And if, in fact, you find anything that has personality in these, and I guess a lack of personality in some way is personality, it's probably the typographic solution in them. I think that they're beautiful, and I think the austerity of them is something that you're going to see carrying forward into future trends. Knit. So keep in mind, we've been doing this for 12 years now. And if you're familiar with the previous trend reports, and actually you can go on LogoLounge and you can look at all 12 of the previous reports. You'll notice that over the years we've had a variety of logos that kind of weave into each other, where you have the warp and the weft kind of going together, the vertical and the horizontal strokes of material being formed to create this strength from many pieces. And the thing that I like about knit, and this is kind of unique for this, is that, you know, it's kind of picking up on that same concept. But look how much more difficult it is to create this process. I mean, this speaks to a company with this kind of interlocking process, a company that has figured out a very complex process, but has found a way to demonstrate it in such a simple method that the consumers can understand. So it's this idea of taking the complex solution and making it incredibly simple, but at the same time taking a single strand of something, very base element, and creating something very strong out of it at the same time, because we all have this association with various types of fabric and likes. 5, geography. Here's the great thing about being, I guess, the founder of LogoLounge, is that I get literally, you know, hundreds and hundreds of emails from our members around the world. And by the way, I'm very open to email and conversation, so feel free to approach me. But they send me lots of ideas throughout the year. And one of the designers had said, you know, I'm seeing all of these nations and countries and things working. And sure enough, as I'm looking at these, I'm kind of going, sure enough, you know. So if you think about it, again, kind of going back to Colorado, that's pretty easy to work with. It's a square. But, you know, what do you do with Africa? What do you do with Brazil? What do you do with New Zealand? So these are marks where there's kind of that aha moment in them where you realize that that leopard spot is actually Africa, or that the frothy top on that cool beer is actually Brazil, you know, or that there are holes in the cheese from New Zealand, which reminisces of Swiss cheese, and I didn't even realize that was where it came from. But the idea of giving this homage to the nation or the country, there's a little bit of a wink attached to these, so that you get the idea that none of them are taking themselves too terribly seriously. This guy, I don't know, I just threw it in there because I thought it was funny. No, actually, that's not the case. Hexagons. He was holding beehives, and I will tell you, if any trend kind of came out of the blue and in thunder this year, it was the idea of using hexagons in every possible fashion. And a lot of reasons behind this. You know, as you start to think about the hexagon, you know, okay, so it's the cell shape for a beehive. It is an economical shape to work with. Think about companies and what the attributes are that they're trying to place here. It is a relatively technical shape. It obviously is a couple of generations or steps ahead of circles, triangles, squares, and the likes. It has, without a doubt, won the award this year for the shape that the most badges or crests, such as this bomber logo, are in, because it's being used over and over. When I think about the technical aspect of this, we're also seeing a lot of cubes, but in order to really play out the idea of a cube, you almost have to tip it so you can see 3 different surfaces on it, this dimensionality. And when you do that, what happens? It's a hexagon shape. So it's just this use of hexagons everywhere. Just to give you a sense, here's some of the diversity of some of the ones that we had pulled out. So it's everywhere and anywhere. It's the hexagon. It's the happy shape. Waves. So I could have called this Wi-Fi. I didn't want to have a lawsuit for a registered term. I called it Waves. That's, by the way, that's my prerogative to name these things what I want to. So if there's any bad names in here, feel free to email me, tell me I'm stupid. And by the way, I've had people do that. So the Wi-Fi symbol, actually, it's interesting to note the original Wi-Fi symbol didn't have those little lines in that. This is kind of what happened when they realized that, oh, that's the symbol for Wi-Fi and that's our name. So we ought to, incorporate it into our logo. Obviously, it's the symbol used by Apple as well as anybody else to kind of indicate Wi-Fi. You show these kind of little motion wave lines in order, and everybody knows exactly what it is. And obviously, we're starting to work that into our work quite a bit. One thing I've noticed is typically if those waves run in a vertical fashion, it's indicating Wi-Fi. If it's running horizontally, it's representing sound, unless you're just a bad designer and you didn't know which way sound versus waves go. And, so it's all in there, and we're all happy about it. But I think that one of the things that you should really watch for, and this is one of the things I truly love, and I'll talk a little bit more about, is the idea of new symbols coming up as foundation or base components that we use in identity design. Because as designers, frankly, we have to design another logo that's a heart-shaped, we're going to crater. It's, you just, at a certain point, you reach that saturation on certain shapes. So we kind of beg for new relevance that consumers find within symbols. And I think that one of the things you're going to see is this is probably going to jump over to the point that that little linear component, multiple lines, is just going to represent communication. It's not even about Wi-Fi, it's just communication. Pompons. Okay, so I told you sometimes you don't know where these clusters come from. Some of these are expected, and some of them we just sit there and we go, really? I was watching the HOW graphics a little bit earlier today, and I noticed that they've got one almost like this big adventure when, that's kind of the pieces kind of coming together. I'm not saying that they're anybody influenced by anybody else on this. But as you think about this, then we kind of go, okay, what's it actually saying? So most of these have a great deal of diversity to them. It's many pieces coming together. Think of the story of a bundle of sticks is tough to break. One stick at a time, it's okay. So the strength in numbers idea that comes together. Notice the diversity of color that's typically inside of those. It's the idea of having many opinions that kind of come together around a central axis, a central point within the company. So there's a lot of diversity that this demonstrates for a company, but at the very same time, it indicates this kind of strength of numbers that come together. Gem facets. Okay, so there are certain trends that stick around for years and years. And this is kind of leading into, and the reason that I show this particular chart, which I think is a chart used by gemologists to determine how they're going to actually facet a gemstone and where to cut it along cleavage. One of the interesting things that we saw this year, and let's go back to monolines, remember those, is that, okay, we're kind of picking up this monoline, and we're kind of picking up this faceting because we have these three-dimensional structures going on. But what we're doing is we're starting to describe shape. Instead of by surface, we're describing it by the edge of the object. And I think that that's really interesting because it gives us an opportunity to see that much as the company is, it's something that you can explore, that you can see inside. There's this level of transparency, that whatever is going on inside of the company is something that you're willing to share with everybody else. At the same time, the linear line work in here kind of gives this very scientific, mathematical, we know what we're doing kind of feel to the company. Kind of fun. I like this. While we're on facets, let's go ahead and get these out of the way. Flat facets. Now, we'll talk a little bit later about some of the evolution of facets, but I think this is kind of coming to the end of its cycle. I don't really know. But the idea is, as we are finding, especially again with user interface and the likes, shifting towards a more flat aesthetic as opposed to the realism, you're finding that when there were faceted logos that kind of had this realism to it, that's kind of going away. We're filling those with flat surfaces where it really isn't important that you be able to see into or through these objects. But this kind of gives again, a relatively scientific feel to these companies. One of my favorite things about facets is this. Imagine a rock that's been kicked around for a couple of millennium on the ground, dusty, gray. Somebody reaches down and picks that thing up and realizes that it's a gemstone. and they take that rock and they hone it down and they polish it and they build these planes to it so that it is this captivating, beautiful, crystal, gorgeous color coming through it, light refracting item. And the thing about that concept that I like that associates with companies is think about the companies that convey to their clients, we recognize value where others don't see it. It's this idea that we're able to discover something that anybody else would pass by and hone it to its greatest perfection. And I think that that's a really kind of beautiful story, and there are a lot of companies that kind of run with that. So, for those typographers in the audience, Furman Dido, who created the Dido typeface, movable typeface, back approximately 200 years ago, there was something that was discovered when Dido was digitized, and that is that the thicks and thins obviously are extreme on Dido, and that is reduced it to too small of a point size that the thin strokes just totally vanished when it was reproduced. And that particular term was referred to as dazzle when that would vanish. So we have a number of identities, all of which came in on colored backgrounds, by the way, not my doing. And as you look at them, obviously, in all of these, and there are a number of typefaces that go this direction now, though I believe all of these are custom built, the thin stroke is missing. It's a very elegant way of approaching it, but it's this kind of combination of classical values delivered in a contemporary fashion for the client. It kind of appreciates the essentials and discards the extraneous, which there are a lot of companies that kind of feel that maybe you need to do that. There's also this quasi-stenciling effect to it that gives you the feeling of a little bit of industrial feel along with this classicism that kind of run together. I'm anxious to see Dana Tanamachi. I put this up here because I'm a huge admirer of her work, and obviously over the last several years we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of design products that are put out there that have handcrafted calligraphy, lettering, and the likes on it, and she's obviously made a tremendous name for herself with those. And this year, this is one of those categories that's almost kind of hard to break up or to determine how you really want to deal with it, but it's all over the place. And it's basically the idea of type that is entirely handcrafted. And it's kind of an indication that, you know, it's an unpretentious delivery of something that is relatively elaborate. And think about how tough that is to actually combine those two things together. It certainly speaks to the human effort. And I think especially as you see the pendulum swing, that you see more and more companies that are kind of fighting the flatness and kind of going, okay, there's something very humanistic about this company. The man isn't involved here, it's the human that's involved here. And I think that this does a really good job of kind of bringing that quality to it. Trans-menagerie. This could be taken a lot of ways. That's actually for transparent. A trans-menagerie, it's, you know, and again, transparency has been one of these trends that has been with us for a period of time. I will tell you that as we go back in previous reports, we find that there was a period of time where we were seeing a lot of pixels that were overlapping, and then we moved into, you know, from squares into triangles that were overlapping, and then into this variety of geometric shapes that were overlapping. And this year we've kind of moved into animals built out of geometric shapes that are overlapping. And I don't know why it is, but oftentimes you find that the tail end of a trend is when they finally take it to animals. It's kind of like, okay, and the last thing do an animal, just do an animal out of it. Well, you know, and so maybe we're about there on this. I don't really know, but you know, here's the great thing about animals, and this is something I'm very fortunate to have just produced with. I guess I'm not a producer. I just perform for lynda.com has been very generous, and I've just done a online educational piece with them, LogoLounge, symbols and logos. And one of the things that we talk about in there is the fact that animals give you this amazing ability to create an essence for a company because they carry implied equity. And when I say implied equity, if I were to say something like clever as a, you would say, yeah, fox, and wise as an loyal as a dog. I mean, there's this whole thing. So what happens here is because you already have these associations that we've grown up with, when you use an animal in some way with an identity, you've already done half the job. All you have to do now is figure out, what am I going to add on to that dog to convey the rest of the essence that I need to convey about this company? So it's the concept of implied equity. And, so animals aren't bad. Stacked. Dang, we're getting close to that 15. Okay, designers at this point have entirely abandoned hyphens. They've abandoned the need to break between consonants. Everything that I ever learned about how to break words. But basically, it's taking a word mark and turning it into a logotype or a symbol, bringing the typography together in such a way that it's still very intelligent. It's one of those things that whenever you can, if you create an identity that forces a consumer to participate so that they've got to actually work at it. And because these are somewhat puzzle-like, it's a bit like reading a vanity tag, after all the good ones are gone and you're trying to make out what that thing really means. And these logos, I think, do it, but they do it in a very intelligent way. Monocrest, and here's 15 guys, and that's how many I do a year. Monocrest is coming back to, again, the monoline. And if I go back to 2010, we first introduced the idea of monoline, but it was all kinds of lines. It wasn't just like this. And what we're starting to see is there were so many directions that we could have gone. There were so many mono suggestions, and you'll see some of them in a bit, that we ended up picking monocrests. A crest is always a beautiful item because it allows you to combine this idea of image, decoration, typography all in one, so that when you've got that client that says, I was thinking maybe a picture of my truck and my name. And we started in '64, that was my dad. And I like curly cues, so you kind of, so it's this ability to kind of pull these various things together when you have obnoxious clients that really don't know what they're looking for and they aren't happy with what you give them. But no, these are all really beautiful, and I like the airiness of them that they give off. They certainly put across some kind of a bit of a contemporary heritage. I realize that doesn't sound like it should work together, but a crest always kind of conveys that, you've been around, you know what you're doing, despite the fact that these are handled in a very contemporary fashion. Now, so LogoLounge, we're one of those huge conglomerates that collects information on you. Okay, not really, but we do know what people are searching for as an aggregate. We do know what keywords are being entered when people are loading up the 212,000 logos. So we've got a tremendous database that we also use as part of this, that we're able to look in and see where there are certain trends. For instance, this particular page happens to play out, what we did was we looked for descriptive words, not nouns, that had the largest jump, if you will, in the last 365 days. So they've been tooling along, and then all of a sudden there was a spike in them. And those particular ones are kind of looking through here: handmade, organic, geometric, wellness, technology, industrial, growth, and happy. And that is a damn strange list, because if you really think, we've got like handmade and organic on this side, and we've got industrial and technology on this side. So it's kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum, and nobody's operating in the middle during this year. Nouns, things that people are entering as keywords that they are searching for. And those are badge, that upper shape, which we often refer to as a crest, monograms, diamonds, hexagons, go figure, we had a hint there, birds, mountains, rocks, and feather. So that kind of shows you what people are searching for. Industry stats. Because when people enter a logo, what they're able to do is indicate that the industry that this logo is for. And again, what we've done is we've looked for which industries have had the biggest spike over the last 365 days. They were kind of tooling along, and then all of a sudden there was this kind of bounce in there. Number one was food trucks. Okay, look at this. You can kind of figure this out. Number two is photography. 3 is education. 4 was sports. 5 was retail. And 6 was fashion. There we go. Shh. we're going to do some extra trends. So they twisted my arm before I came here and said, would you show them some extra stuff? So we're going to throw out 12 that were cast outs. You won't see these anywhere else because they don't go in my report. By the way, How has been incredibly generous. They have, if you go to my name, I think, on their site, you can actually download the entire report. These 12 won't be on there, so you can kind of keep them to yourself. Please shut off all your cameras. No, I'm kidding. I don't care. Like that's going to happen. Okay, so again, the 46. There's your chance to take them if you want to. God, look at this. What control! Does that flash really work in here? Would you shut that off and do it again? Just, okay, no, that's fine. Okay, we're moving on. So flat icons, maybe no surprise here. Again, as we are concerned more and more with the idea of especially dealing with user interface and responsive design, where you are dealing with many consumers that are looking on their mobile device. Just this year, actually December of this year, the tipping point occurred. More people are looking at information on their mobile devices than they are on desktops or laptops. So, you know, be aware. You've got to work in this little environment, and flat design obviously works incredibly well there. They're incredibly simple icons. If they've got a wink or a story to them, it has to happen very quickly. Because I've had so many of our members that have talked to me about long shadows, I've got to bring it up. How many of you are familiar with the term long shadows? Okay, a few of you. Okay, here's a story about the pendulum swinging. Pendulums swing, and when they get to the other end, they don't stop. They come back to this side over here. So when you're looking at trends and you're looking at a pendulum swing in there, keep in mind that when you think you've reached the extent of it, it's going to start going backwards, and we're going to start seeing stuff we've seen before. So here's how long shadows comes about. So here's a logo of a Ruby that was done a number of years ago during realism. And basically the idea is people wanted to say, okay, as you look at this, you get this sense that there's this transparency, and I can see right through it, and I get this essence that I can actually reach out and touch the thing, so on and so forth. And we move into a point where we're going, okay, we need to get a little bit flatter with this. So what we do is we design a logo of the Ruby, and we say, okay, so let's hang on to some of that transparency in here, but what we'd like to do is knock out the, the real dimensionality of it. We're just going to kind of flatten this out a little bit. Then the designers of Ruby, R-U-B-E-E, came up with this Ruby and said, okay, you know what, it doesn't matter. Let's pretend this gemstone is made out of plastic. I don't know, that you can't see through it. That it's just flat surface and entirely defined by color on those planes. And what ends up happening is especially as user interface designers are working with an environment on a screen where they're going, okay, flat colors work very well in here. I don't need to worry about transparencies and the likes. But there's huge tension associated with flat areas of color. It's kind of like, somebody, please break the tension on this thing. So they decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start casting long shadows off of things that are flat. If it's flat, it doesn't make a shadow, okay? It's, okay. But hey, we're designers. We can do whatever we want to. Not everything, just the important things have shadows in flat world. But that's flat. Coloring book. Okay, if you give a monoline designer a bunch of logos and a box of crayons, what can I say? It's maybe the pendulum's swinging backwards again here. So we're starting to see color come into these. They're incredibly simple. They put across a very quick and simple, almost kind of juvenile message. Monoline script, I told you get tired of monoline. So here's what's going on with monoline script. Obviously, monoline becomes popular, and typographers start saying, yep, great, this will be perfect for me to build a script out of, or some of these are hand done and the likes. But if you think about it, it is kind of this combination of diametrically opposed ideas. You think of script as being this personalization, and you think of monoline as being this very mechanical thing, this generic thing. So it's kind of like this generic personalization. Can't say I get it. It works. Some work by Joe Bosack. Joe Bosack is one of my favorite designers. Anybody in here familiar with Joe Bosack? just an incredible designer out of Pennsylvania. He does a huge amount of work for athletic teams, universities, professionals, does a lot of work for Nike in crafting out identities. This happens to be one he'd done for the New Orleans Privateers. And the thing that I often look for is influences in other areas, illustration styles, other design areas that are kind of coming over to logo design. And with this is a situation where, you know, if you are a sports logo designer, it's imperative outside of having good craftsmanship and being a good illustrator that you put the gray stroke on it. You know, it's, no, really, if I put a gray stroke around it, it's got to be a team. You know, it'll work on a blue jersey. It'll work on a white jersey. This is it's a miracle. This thing will work you know, you got a gray out. It doesn't work well on gray outfits. Disney this year, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but during March Madness, they decided that they were going to do a bracketology between Disneyland rides versus Disney World rides. So they literally hired designers to do 32 logos, sports logos, of each and every one of their rides, almost. Somebody look it up. I never did. I don't know who won. Just because I've got Dumbo up there doesn't mean he necessarily won. Sportification, we're calling this, which is basically this. You know, if you've got a pink unicorn, you've got to introduce him that way. Been looking for a reason to use that effect in this for years, and it finally came about. But with sportification, look at these. It gives this essence of team. None of these are teams. It gives this idea of working together, this same kind of language that you get from team, this same kind of homage that you may pay to your team that you pay to these groups. But I think you're going to see more and more of that language drifting over into traditional identity design. You know, sometimes we have trends, and I'm kind of like going, just stop it. Just stop it, you know, and bees were one of those. No offense, I've done my bees. You know, I'll still do a few more bees in my lifetime. I don't know. But, you know, the bee is great. It indicates industry. It indicates working well together with others. It, you know, makes a good sticky, sweet product in the end. All these things that potentially a company might want to be associated with that are good attributes. But enough. Acorns, another enough. You know, from humble beginnings become great things, auspicious things turn into something huge. You know, it reminds me of the saying that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. You know, it's one of those things where the acorn has just had enormous effect this year. There have been a lot of them, and I'll let you do three more acorns, that's it. Mountains, and not just for geographic reasons. A lot of these represent this idea of being able to achieve high standards, reaching a summit, a peak, a pinnacle, if you will, for a corporation. But just, and again, that was one of the most searched terms that we had as well. You know, I throw this picture up here not because I have any idea who these children are, and I really don't, but mostly because as I looked at this, it kind of reminded me of being a child and looking through books and realizing that maybe today's book for a child is, you know, being given the iPad by their parents, you know, with a couple of things turned off, and the child kind of is going through. And think about the process that the child's going through and how similar it is to maybe some similar situation for you as a child. Do you remember looking at books as a child and how you'd see certain letters or certain shapes and how magical they became to you? You know, and think about the icons that the kids are looking at on this pad that they're comfortable with and familiar with for Wi-Fi or for Bluetooth or for, you know, sound or, you know, and this is the foundation iconography that this generation is going to grow up with. So as you're a designer, it's kind of like, well, let me look to these symbols that are basically being produced as icons to represent a function and start to see how they translate into my own design. So it's absolutely of no surprise to me that there were a huge number of controllers that were worked into logos this year. I especially like the one for the kids' dentist, so as they drill ravenously on the child's mouth, they can sit there and play a game. Really, can they multitask that well? I'm just gonna, do they still drill? Clouds, okay, they've got to be there. Had more than one designer said that's got to be in this year's report. If you think about it, we always knew that the stuff we did went off into the ether somewhere. Now we know where it's parked, up there in the cloud, Cumulus, Cirrus, something like that. And the thing that happens with clouds is it becomes a storage device. So think forward on this, because right now we're thinking of it purely from a digital perspective. But I assure you in 10 years, we're probably not going to be using the cloud. There will be something else. But the cloud icon's still going to be around, like the old handset your grandma used to use for telephone still represents a telephone. Clouds are still going to be around, except they're going to represent storage. Just because I show logos doesn't mean I think they're good ideas. You know, they're all well crafted, but really, do you want to base a logo off of an icon that makes you wait? I'm just saying, you know, so the whole loading idea, this is, you know, I've had pizzas delivered in less time than it took my little wheel of death to quit spinning on my computer, I swear. It's, you know, this is, so, but, you know, it's, if you're in computers, I'm just not sure it's a good idea. It might indicate opening to some. This is a logo that was done by Moving Brands, which is out of London, and I've got to tell you, they are one of my absolute favorite firms in the world. They do amazing work and pioneered the field of icons and motion. This was their waiting symbol that they developed for a product and an app called Ness, which helps to determine affinities for the user. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, it just, guys, not a good idea. So this is the last one I'm going to share, and this is by a group called Build, again, out of London. This just came out in the last 2 weeks, and it's for a group called Bureau 347. They work on the internet, digital craftsmen, obviously, and they thought, okay, what happens if instead of the website being responsive, if at the same time we had the logo be responsive? And I'm not sure how I feel about it. Frankly, I think these guys have done a really nice job with this. But I think we're going to see this kind of coming about. So I ended up doing some searching to see if I could find any other responsive logos, and I found this one. See if we get some sound here. By Elena Ramirez, who's a designer, and she's squishing her logo in a squeeze box. Little bug. I'm going, okay, yeah, you know, but this idea of the squeeze box kind of coming in on a logo, and I realize that she's designed this so that it can be responsive, but at the same time, the logo that you're looking at now looks absolutely nothing like the logo that she started out with. You know, so if you're talking about development of brand equity, it's kind of like I can't show this logo and say, hey, you recognize this, when they've seen this logo over here. So I'm not sure how I feel about responsive logos yet. I think that it's something that if designed intelligently might work. I will tell you that I've been doing a little bit of research to see what's out there, and we're wondering what would happen to some traditional logos if they were put into a responsive squeeze box. Yeah, no. Oh yeah, Microsoft is into it. Big time, big time. Missed. It's an Apple audience, right? Okay. Missed. Missed. Oh, missed it. Get it. Ah! My deepest apologies to Miles Newland for this one. I love this logo, by the way. I swear, those are icons in there. They really are. Top of an ice cream cone. That was all that was, guys. Anybody from Target here? No, okay. And what happens if you do the color rose? Okay, there we go. Okay. Pounding along here, if I were to tell you that I wanted some assistance from you in helping to determine where something was going, and I gave you a map and there was a stick pin right in the middle of a road, and I said, okay, look at that stick pin, that represents a person, where are they going, when are they going to go to where? And you're going to look at it and go, I have no idea why. And I'm going to say, what would happen if I put 2 other pins in there indicating where they were the same time in the previous 2 days? Then you have enough information that you can kind of go, oh, well, it looks like they're traveling by car, moving about this speed, they're covering about that much area a day, and they're probably going to Louisville, they're probably going to, I don't know, Memphis, somewhere in that zone. But you have enough information that you can start to project forward. And this is the whole idea behind trends, is that if you take a look at what we've done in the past, you can get ahead of them so that you can meet them when they catch up with you in Louisville. So, if you take a look at the bottom, these are trends that we've just pulled out from over the last 7 years. You've got in 2008 when we were doing facets, and we had to really look hard at that time to find faceted logos. They all looked like the front end of the gyms. And if you move forward, you'll notice that by 2010, the folks from Iconologic did the really amazing logo for the U.S. Virgin Islands that has this faceting to it that was part of our Cubist. Up along the top, you've got mosaics that moved into digital, that moved into Bucky's, which was Buckminster Fuller's little triangles, which moves forward into tessellation, which is this idea of pulling together tiles. And you can kind of see this motion forward. You get little outliers that happen in there. It's kind of like when we did spores in there. It's this kind of combination between mosaic and this faceting that's kind of going on. Or if you take the MasterCard logo, which was when we were first starting to see soft edges in 2009, and move it forward to 2010, where you see these images that are entirely soft, absolutely nothing hard about them, called ghosts. And even moving that one forward along with tessellation or along with Bucky to create this kind of soft focus. And if you look at these, what you're doing is you're starting to say, okay, I'm seeing this happening and this happening and this happening, so they're going to Louisville. That's where the design is going. So what you do is you get up here ahead of it and you kind of go, okay, I'm going to marry a couple of these things together so that I can actually see what's going to go on. So if we take this year's trends and take a look at these, we can see that on the bottom, this was one that we didn't use this year, but it was this idea of these crystals, and it doesn't matter what direction you're looking at them from, they've become much more three-dimensional. If you take a look here, you find this kind of combination of tessellation and Cubist where it's coming in, and it's actually serving as a background behind these logos. One more, kind of coming up, here we go again with tessellation and the Cubist kind of merging together, creating these kind of flat facets. And again, you can watch these and you can kind of go, and I have designers that come to me that go, you've been talking about this for years and I just figured it out. I'm doing it now. This is the way that I figure out how to get ahead, is by actually investigating what's been done and how to stay one step ahead of it. Branching, if you take it, took in 2011 when we were doing these monolines, and in 2013 when it became much more refined, the lines were all just one single thickness, and the way that they were handled was very mechanical. It's kind of like, it doesn't surprise you that this year we had this many different monoline directions. Marriage, if you take a look at Cubist and you take a look at monoline, any surprise? Where are we going, guys? You start to put these together and you can start to develop your own direction that you want to build off of this. Mrs. Christ, my chemistry teacher from high school. Dun, dun, just had to put her in there. She's dead, I'm sure. Doesn't care. So, okay. So in 2013, molecules. This idea of these balls put together with the little tinker toy, the little linkage in between, showing this linkage and communications aspect. And look, as we move forward, I didn't show this one this year, but we were starting to see this chemical language idea. So, oh, look, hexagons! But this idea of letters and lines being pulled together in a chemical equation. So I ask you, where does that go? You know, what's the next step? Well, okay. Maybe that chemical language is still there, but maybe it takes on 3 dimensions. It starts to wrap and warp. Maybe the letters are no longer letters, but maybe they're symbols that are used inside of there. So you can start to change things out, but evolve this forward. Hand-drawn foreign cast, in 2013, we were seeing all of this written stuff inside shapes like we did when we were in junior high in our notebooks, and now we can sell it. In 2014, obviously seeing all these different directions that the type is going, the question is, okay, so where is this going? If you really want to know, I'm going to let you play match game, because, here's just the stuff that we pulled off a portion of it from all the hand-drawn type that we had this year, and you're kind of going, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. So, find your own trend directions there. Foggy forecast. If you take this idea of soft focus and or partial focus and you move that forward into 2014, I didn't show this trend, but we're starting to see these logos that look like somebody has taken pastel and kind of smudged it on the page a little bit. No hard edges to it. So I ask you, take your own imagination and tell me where this goes. What's that next step? Find one of the trends. Find something else that you marry this with for your next idea. Here's the reason I teach you about this tool. So this is a fresco, actually in Venice by Bernini, of Galileo. And Galileo is the one standing behind the telescope And this is base 1609 was the time period here. And as Galileo is watching the Doge of Venice look through there, he's looking out to the harbor. And the reason he's looking out the harbor is because at that time, Venice was a very important trade port, and they were having ships that were being attacked by marauders just out of eyesight. And they may be coming in or they may be going out. But by sharing the telescope, which wasn't commonly known by people, it was something that was being held back by those people that needed to know, they could actually see the marauder ships on the horizon out there. So they could send people out in ships to abscond the marauders so that their ships could make it on into port. It was a tool. You know, nothing physically changed in the world. Same information, same stuff. It's just that they had a better tool that they can use. And by kind of using this report as a tool, you have that ability to kind of forecast. The part about this story that I really love is it was speculated for years that Galileo was paid handsomely by a group of spice traders. I don't think it was them, that had the uncanny knack of dropping their spices or dropping the price on their old spices just before ships would arrive with new cargoes of fresh spices. So even in industry, even entrepreneurs have been using, you know, forecast tools for years. I expect you guys to do basically the same with this. I will close on this. Thank you, How Design, very much again. This entire thing, all those pictures you've taken weren't for naught, but is available on the How website. As you are leaving, there are 2 freebies. I swear we have never done this before, but LogoLounge, which has just put on a new component on our site which allows you to actually participate in trend forecasting, picking some of your own out and making them public. LogoLounge has 2 things. One, a lynda.com card for you, which is good for 1 free week, which is an amazing value, by the way, of lynda.com services so that you can see my presentation or any of the other presentations done by these amazing folks. And secondly, there is a card which is for a free month of LogoLounge, and I have never done anything free before like that. So take advantage of it. It's just good for 1 month, but those are outside the door as you leave. And thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.